On the night of November 7, 1942, the Atlantic Ocean carried an uneasy silence. Beneath a moonless sky, hundreds of Allied ships cut through dark waters toward an unfamiliar shore. Packed inside landing craft were thousands of young American soldiers, many of them experiencing their first taste of war. They were not heading toward Nazi Germany. They were not aiming for Italy. Instead, they were sailing toward French-held North Africa, a place where the enemy was uncertain, loyalties were blurred, and hesitation could prove fatal. This was Operation Torch, the first large-scale American amphibious invasion of the Second World War. It was a gamble born of desperation and strategic necessity. By late 1942, the Allied war effort faced enormous strain. Britain had endured years of relentless conflict. The Soviet Union was locked in a brutal, existential struggle on the Eastern Front. The United States, newly drawn into the war after Pearl Harbor, needed to prove that it could fight, land, and win on foreign soil. Torch would be that test. The plan was bold and controversial. Instead of striking directly at Europe's fortified coastline, Allied leaders chose to invade French North Africa, then controlled by the Vichy French regime. These forces were not active Axis allies, yet they were not Allied partners either. Their response to an invasion was unpredictable. They might surrender, they might resist, or they might fight fiercely to defend their territory. No one could say for certain. Command of the Western landings fell to George S. Patton, a man already known for his intensity, discipline, and unwavering belief in offensive action. Patton was tasked with leading the Western Task Force, a formation of roughly 32,000 men, across hundreds of miles of ocean to land on the Moroccan coast. The scale of the operation was unprecedented for the United States. There would be no rehearsal under fire, no margin for error, and little reliable intelligence about what awaited them on shore. Patton understood the stakes. Failure at Torch would not simply cost lives. It would shatter Allied confidence in American leadership and delay any future invasion of Europe. Success, however, would open the Mediterranean, isolate Axis forces in North Africa, and announce the United States as a decisive military power. For Patton, this was not merely an operation, it was a proving ground. As the invasion fleet approached the coast, Patton moved among his officers with calm authority. He believed that uncertainty was inevitable in war, but paralysis was unforgivable. His philosophy was simple: momentum creates opportunity, and hesitation invites disaster. Whatever resistance the French might offer, Patton intended to meet it head-on. When dawn broke on November 8, 1942, the silence would end, guns would fire, alliances would be tested, and America's first great step into global land warfare would begin, not against its declared enemies, but against former friends whose response would shape the future of the war. As dawn broke on November 8, 1942, the Moroccan coastline emerged from darkness. What had been abstract planning tables and uncertain intelligence now became reality: sand, surf, and gunfire. The Western Task Force began its landings at three critical points: Port Lyautey, Fedhala, and Safi. Each location presented its own dangers, but all shared one unnerving truth: the defenders were French, not German. At Fedhala, resistance came swiftly. As landing craft neared shore, French coastal batteries opened fire, forcing American troops to disembark under chaotic conditions. Boats grounded in the wrong places. Units became scattered. Officers struggled to orient their men amid smoke, shouting, and exploding shells. What had been planned as a swift landing turned into a fragmented fight for survival. Yet despite confusion, the troops pressed forward. driven by urgency and fear of being pinned against the sea. Further south at Safi, the objective was bold: seize the port intact to allow rapid unloading of tanks and supplies. Here, naval gunfire proved decisive. American destroyers moved dangerously close to shore, hammering French positions with direct fire. The gamble paid off. Though resistance was stiff, French defenses weakened under relentless pressure, allowing U.S. forces to gain control of key infrastructure before it could be destroyed. At Port Lyautey, the situation was more complex. French forces held strong defensive positions near the airfield, and early assaults stalled. Intelligence failures became painfully clear. Maps were inaccurate. Enemy strength had been underestimated. Yet, withdrawal was never considered. Instead, American units regrouped, flanked resistance where possible, and continued advancing despite mounting casualties. Throughout the landings, one principle guided command decisions: maintain momentum. Orders emphasized constant pressure, even when communications failed or plans unraveled. This approach reflected a deliberate philosophy. Large-scale objectives would move forward like a steamroller, while local commanders adjusted tactics on the ground. Waiting for perfect information was seen as more dangerous than advancing with imperfect knowledge. The most controversial decision unfolded near Casablanca. Despite incomplete intelligence about French intentions and defenses, the assault continued. The risk was enormous. A prolonged fight could turn the city into a symbol of American failure. Instead, sustained naval bombardment and steady ground pressure began to erode French resolve. Ships were sunk or forced back into harbor. Defensive lines cracked. The psychological weight of overwhelming force became impossible to ignore. By the end of the first day, it was clear that Operation Torch would not collapse under its own ambition. Though casualties were higher than anticipated and coordination uneven, the landings had succeeded in securing footholds across the coast. American forces were ashore, advancing inland and adapting rapidly under fire. The invasion had exposed hard truths about inexperience, about intelligence gaps, and about the unpredictable nature of fighting former allies. But it had also revealed something else. The United States Army, though untested, could endure chaos and keep moving forward. The battle for North Africa was no longer theoretical. It was unfolding, beach by beach, mile by mile. By November 9th, 1942, the initial chaos of the landings had given way to a dangerous new phase: decision-making under pressure. American forces were ashore, but victory was not yet secure. French units still held key positions. Casablanca remained contested, and intelligence reports were fragmentary at best. It was at this moment that the defining characteristic of the campaign emerged. Not technology, not numbers, but command will. At the center of that will stood George S. Patton. Patton's approach during Operation Torch followed a clear doctrine. Strategic plans would move forward relentlessly, like a steamroller. Tactical execution, however, would remain flexible, responding instantly to opportunity or weakness. This philosophy rejected caution born of uncertainty. In Patton's mind, waiting for perfect intelligence was itself a fatal mistake. Nowhere was this tested more sharply than in the continued assault on Casablanca. Reports reaching headquarters were incomplete and sometimes contradictory. Some French commanders appeared willing to negotiate. Others continued to fight with determination. Coastal defenses, though weakened, were not fully neutralized. Advisors warned that pushing too hard might harden resistance or escalate casualties unnecessarily. Yet Patton saw delay as the greater danger. Any pause, he believed, would allow French forces to reorganize, reinforce, or destroy critical port facilities. The order was given: maintain pressure. Naval guns resumed their pounding of coastal batteries and harbor defenses. On land, American units advanced cautiously but continuously, probing for gaps and exploiting every sign of weakening resistance. The message to subordinate commanders was unambiguous: momentum must not be lost. Even when communications broke down, initiative was encouraged. Officers were expected to act, not wait. This relentless advance carried psychological weight. French commanders faced a growing realization that the Americans would not disengage, negotiate mid-battle, or retreat to reassess. The sheer persistence of the assault began to undermine morale. What had initially been framed as a defensive stand transformed into a calculation of inevitability. By November 11th, the calculus was complete. French resistance collapsed, and an armistice was agreed upon. Fighting ceased across the Western Task Force's area of operations. The guns fell silent, not because every position had been destroyed, but because continued resistance no longer served a purpose. The steamroller had done its work. Yet the victory was not purely military. The manner in which it was achieved left lingering questions. Casualties had been higher than expected. Decisions had been made with limited intelligence. And American forces had learned, at great cost, what modern amphibious warfare demanded. Torch exposed weaknesses in coordination, communication, and preparation, even as it demonstrated adaptability and resolve. For Patton, the outcome confirmed his belief in aggressive leadership. The campaign validated his conviction that war rewarded decisiveness more than hesitation. But it also placed a heavy responsibility on command, one that extended beyond surrender papers and battlefield success. With the armistice signed, Operation Torch entered a new phase. The fighting was over, but the consequences of victory, political, cultural, and moral, were only beginning to unfold. The signing of the armistice on November 11, 1942, did not bring rest. It brought responsibility. With the guns silent, American commanders were forced to confront a challenge no less complex than combat itself: how to turn conquest into cooperation. For George S. Patton, the transition from battlefield commander to political negotiator happened almost instantly. French authority in Morocco had not vanished. It had fractured. Civil administration, port operations, transportation networks, and public order all required urgent attention. Any misstep could ignite unrest or push former defenders into open hostility. Patton understood that victory could be undone if mishandled. Military success had to be followed by political stability. Patton began a series of meetings with French officials aimed at restoring cooperation rather than enforcing humiliation. The objective was clear: unite former opponents against the common Axis enemy. These discussions were pragmatic rather than sentimental. French officers were reassured of their continued role in local governance, while American forces focused on securing infrastructure and maintaining order. It was an uneasy partnership, forged not by trust, but by necessity. One of the most symbolic moments of this transition came when Patton met the Sultan of Morocco. The encounter reflected a broader recognition that North Africa was not merely a battlefield. It was a living region with deep traditions, long histories, and its own political realities. Respect for local customs became more than a courtesy. It was a strategic requirement. Stability depended on it. In his personal observations, Patton noted the striking contrasts around him. Ancient cities stood beside modern artillery positions. Traditional agricultural practices continued even as convoys rolled past. Markets reopened while soldiers still dug defensive positions nearby. The war had not erased Moroccan life. It had collided with it. Patton expressed admiration for the resilience of the local population and the endurance of cultural traditions under the strain of occupation and invasion. Yet beneath this respect lay tension. Military necessity often clashed with cultural preservation. Roads were requisitioned, buildings were commandeered, civil life bent under the weight of operational demands. Patton recognized the contradiction even as he accepted it. For him, the war's objective remained paramount, defeating the Axis. Cultural sensitivity mattered, but it could not override strategic imperatives. This duality, respect alongside ruthlessness, defined Patton's conduct in Morocco. He could appreciate the land and its people, while simultaneously imposing the requirements of total war. It was a balance that few commanders managed gracefully, and one that historians continue to debate. Operation Torch had delivered a military victory, but its true test lay in what followed. Cooperation with French forces was restored. Infrastructure was repaired. Supply lines began to flow eastward. The Mediterranean, long contested, was opening to Allied movement once again. As stability took hold, Patton's role in Morocco drew to a close. A new assignment awaited him, one that would test the lessons learned during Torch against a far more dangerous enemy. The war was moving east, and so was Patton. As stability returned to Morocco, Operation Torch revealed its deeper significance, not merely as a successful invasion, but as a turning point in Allied confidence and capability. The campaign had proven that American forces could plan, execute, and sustain large-scale amphibious operations under real combat conditions. It also exposed weaknesses that would shape future victories: flawed intelligence, coordination challenges, and the brutal cost of inexperience. These lessons would not be forgotten. With North Africa's western flank secured, attention shifted eastward. Axis forces, German and Italian, were consolidating in Tunisia, preparing for a far more formidable defense. It was here that the consequences of Torch would be fully tested. Patton was reassigned to command the II Corps, tasked with restoring discipline and combat effectiveness after early setbacks against seasoned German units. The urgency of this mission underscored Torch's role as a rehearsal for larger, deadlier campaigns to come. Ceremonies and recognitions followed the Moroccan campaign, honoring both American and French contributions. Former adversaries now stood together, united by a shared objective. This transformation, from confrontation to cooperation, was one of Torch's most enduring outcomes. It demonstrated that war could reshape alliances as swiftly as it redrew front lines. The Mediterranean sea lanes reopened. Supplies flowed. The strategic noose tightened around Axis forces in North Africa. Yet Operation Torch left behind unresolved questions that extend beyond military success. Patton's steamroller strategy, while effective, forced historians and readers alike to confront the moral weight of command decisions. Advancing with incomplete intelligence saved time and preserved momentum. But at what cost? Civilian disruption, cultural strain, and unnecessary casualties lingered as uncomfortable byproducts of decisive action. The campaign became a case study in the tension between operational necessity and ethical responsibility. Patton himself reflected on these contradictions. His writings reveal admiration for Moroccan culture, alongside unapologetic acceptance of war's intrusions. He understood that leadership demanded choices with irreversible consequences. To hesitate might doom an operation. To advance might scar a society. Torch required commanders to choose, repeatedly, without certainty. and live with the outcomes. From a strategic perspective, the operation's impact was undeniable. Allied control of North Africa paved the way for the invasion of Sicily, the collapse of Italian fascism, and the eventual liberation of Western Europe. Torch marked America's arrival as a global military power capable of sustained offensive warfare. It replaced doubt with resolve and theory with experience. In retrospect, Operation Torch stands as a moment when history pivoted quietly but decisively. There was no single dramatic breakthrough, no instant collapse of the enemy. Instead, success emerged through persistence, adaptation, and the willingness to act amid uncertainty. Patton's leadership embodied that reality, flawed, forceful, and effective. On the shores of North Africa, America learned how to wage modern war. It learned that victory demanded more than strength. It demanded judgment. Operation Torch delivered both lessons, written in sand, steel, and sacrifice.